Hello, everyone. Welcome to our installment of the Back to Basics Workshop from the African Climate Alliance Education Team. I am Chulu Nkasela and I work with the African Climate Alliance. And this week we will be discussing how climate change affects our mental health and basically understanding eco-climate change, or eco-anxiety and mental health, mental wellness, mental well-being. So yeah, we'll be discussing along those lines for this session. A bit of a disclaimer before I move forward, that the concepts that we're going to be discussing here can be workshopped on their own. So after this workshop, you can go ahead and do more research after the workshop and learn more about the concepts that we're going to be discussing and the types of things that we're going to be discussing. We'll also be discussing, resources in terms of how to get help and all of that. So you can go and look more into that. And just another disclaimer, just for today's workshop, this is a workshop about mental health, mental wellness, and mental well-being. So it's important that in this space, as we always do, we promote mental well-being and mental wellness, as is tradition for the African Climate Alliance. Just before we do a bit of a check-in, Michelle, as always, I am with Mitchelle Mhaka, and we'll be co-piloting today's workshop together. Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself and show your face?
Of course, thanks, Chulu. This is me, a very, very familiar face, and so excited to see such a full room today discussing this very important topic. We thought, just deviating a little bit from our normal check-ins, talking about where you're logging in from, which I've already seen people start to do in the comments, which is wonderful. I mean, carry on doing that because you never know who's in your region, right? But for today, we thought to just ask, how are we arriving today? You are free to unmute. You're free to put your hand up so we can recognize you, or you can put in the chat how you are arriving. Maybe why you are arriving the way that you are arriving. I think that would also be interesting. And maybe I can kick us off. I think I'm arriving as, I'm trying to see which number this one is. I think 10. That should be 10, right in the corner there, with that bear, just that panda just like laying on the tree stump. Like that's how I'm arriving today, only because I feel like I've had a really long year and I am feeling quite tired. But on the inside, I'm probably feeling like a 2. I'm quite excited for today's session. So yeah, with that said, I see Aziza say number 4, tired is the most overused word. Aziza from South Africa, we see you being tired, especially after that game with the Springboks and England. No, that was tiring. That was tiring, okay? Shanae says number 3, just realized it's almost payday. Well, that is exciting. That's exciting. But it also means debit orders, doesn't it? So, like, I understand that number 3. We have Khopotso. Please go ahead. You can unmute.
Hi everyone, I'm Khopotso Khatebe and I'm arriving as a number 8 at heart. Very enthusiastic, very happy, and grateful. But my exterior is giving number 4 because yeah, it's that time of the year, so exhausted, a lot of deadlines, and it's really busy. Thank you.
and that's okay. I think in the chat, please give me Nika, Yoni, Onalika, who says number 10 for me, 2 months till 2024. Right? I feel the same. I feel the same. Helping says, it's too much, yeah. And then also, anyone else?
Michelle, you're breaking a bit, so I don't know whether it's your mic or your network. You sound like you're talking underwater. You're completely gone now. Yeah, so let me continue with the check-in whilst Michelle sorts out their technology. They are women in technology, so they should be able to sort that out. Yeah, so let me just go through the chat. Aziza is feeling like a number 4. Tired is the most overused word, and Aziza is feeling like a number 4 from South Africa, and Shanae is feeling like a number 3, and they just realized that it's almost payday. Nika is feeling like number 10 because 2 more months till 2024. We all there. Calvin is feeling like a number 9. It's too hot where Calvin is based. Let me just go through. Okay, that's about it. In terms of how I am feeling right now and on what number am I am feeling, a bit like a number 6. I'm feeling like number 6. A lot is happening, end of the year. So it's exams on the side and it's, just trying to get things together and working. And I think being in this space, in this workshop is really just going to set the tone for the week for me and calm it down a bit for me, hopefully. And I'm hoping that it's going to be like that for everyone. Like we shared, this is a workshop about mental health and wellness and well-being. Yeah. So as per usual, we have rules of how to engage and how to handle ourselves in this space as we are trying to promote a safe and brave space, especially for today. Like I said, it is a workshop around mental health. Though these are values we already embody, today they are most important because of the kind of workshop that we're going to be having. So one, please raise your hand if you have a question or a contribution. You can also please practice the rule of 2. So we allow for 2 other people to speak or contribute before you contribute again. So for example, I talk, and after I'm done contributing, I mute my mic and the next person talks. And let's say Michelle talks, right? And when they're done talking, they mute their mic. And then let's say Khuputso talks after that. After Khuputso is done, they mute their mic. Now I am able to contribute again if I have a contribution or a comment. Also, feel free to use your home language. The hope is that we have someone in the room that is able to understand the language so they can help us translate. But in the case that there isn't anyone that is able to help us translate and understand what you have just shared in your home language, we will try to use Google Translate. Gift, if you could mute yourself, please. Thank you. So we will try to use Google Translate, but we understand the limitations that come with that. So we're hoping that we never get to a point where we don't have anyone that understands the language or knows the language. And you are more than welcome to use the chat as we are discussing and as we are going through the workshop and the concepts. If there is something you don't understand, you can drop it in the chat, or when time for discussion is open up, you can then raise your hand and you will be able to unmute and speak once you have been recognized Also, please note that we are using English as a primary language of communication in this space. And that is not to say that, you know, English is the way, but that's just to acknowledge the fact that there is a bit of a language barrier, and we're trying to use a language that can be encompassing of everyone. We hope that one day we'll get to a point where we're able to just all of us communicate in our languages and be able to perfectly understand each other or have a semblance of what the other person is saying. Yeah, let's get into the thick of things. How climate change affects our mental health. And in this workshop, we will be trying to understand eco or climate change anxiety and mental health. What do these mean? What do these mean for our lives? What do these mean for people around us? What do these mean for the situations and the environments that we find ourselves in, for the spaces that we find ourselves in? And most importantly, what do they mean for us? What do they mean for our health? Whether that's mentally, whether that's emotionally, or whether that's physically. What do these mean? And how are all of these affected by climate change? Because it is a problem, you know, that is fast becoming the talk of town. Everyone is talking about climate change, as they should, right? And so because climate change is happening and we're seeing devastation because of climate change happening, how does that affect our mental health or our mental well-being? So we understand that there is a link between how climate change affects our mental health and wellness. And in this session, we'll be looking closely at the relationship that climate change or the climate or the environment in general has with our mental health, with our wellness, with our well-being. There are obviously anxieties and stresses that come with the changing world and our bodies because they are synced to the environment. You know, we find ourselves being put in a position where climate change or changes in the environment means changes to our bodies. And so how do we then navigate these changes? How do we navigate them for ourselves as individuals? How do we navigate them for our families and for our communities? And that is basically what we'll be trying to unpack in this workshop. And then with the dialogue on Wednesday, we hope then to bring people with experience in the climate justice space and in the social justice space who do work with mental health and using the environment as a source of mental wellness and of physical wellness and health. Right. So what do we mean by these terms? We always hear people talking about mental health, but what does mental health really refer to? What do we mean when we're talking about mental health? So when you're talking about mental health, we're basically talking of a person's state with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being, all right? So health as a sector or as a term or as a scientific term generally refers to the wellness of the person or a state of a person, whether that state is physical. So does the person have any physical ailments? Do they have any physical sicknesses or illnesses? Are they feeling some type of way? They might not be entirely sick, but just generally feeling some type of way physically. Are they experiencing any sort of ailments with their emotional well-being, with their psychological well-being? So with mental health, then zooms into the person's states with regards in particular their psychological and emotional well-being. So it focuses on how we are feeling psychologically. So in our brains, because our brains are responsible for how our body is working. Our brains are responsible for our moods. They're responsible for our emotions. They're responsible for our feelings, right? So mental health zooms into the psychological and the emotional. So we're looking at the psychological and the emotional. How we're feeling, what emotions are we experiencing, and what ailments or lack of ailments, or just generally being in a state of contentment and being healthy in a sense, psychologically and emotionally. And we often hear mental health being spoken about often in the context of there being a mental health issue or a condition, right? So when we speak of mental health, we often speak of mental health when we're trying to refer to maybe someone experiencing a depression or someone experiencing some sort of anxiety, right? Or experiencing some sort of trauma. But very seldom is mental health associated with positivity, being of a good and well state of psychological and emotional well-being. And so today we're trying to unpack then, how do we see when we are not in a good mental state? And how do we see when we are in a good mental state? And how do we cultivate that good and well mental state, right? So everyone must have good mental health. And mental health does not really just refer to absence of sickness, but it is a state of complete mental, physical, and social well-being, right? So there are sort of poles that anchor good mental health or good mental wellness. And it is mental, so it's psychological, emotions, and all of that. So mental. It's physical, so to do with our bodies, because whatever you're feeling, your body expresses, right? So it's also physical, and it's also social, because whatever you're feeling, your body is expressing. Whatever other people are feeling, their bodies are expressing, and we all have to communicate with each other. We all have to talk with each other. We all have to be in each other's spaces. We come from families, we come from communities, we come from provinces, we come from countries, right? And so these three aspects, when we speak of mental health, we're speaking about these three anchors that anchor a complete state of mental well-being, right? So I keep on talking about wellness. I also keep on talking about mental well-being and how these two shape our mental health, or how these two have to do with our mental health. So when we're talking about wellness, we're talking about a set of habits. So things that we do, right? Physically, actively. A set of behaviors, so how we express ourselves, how other people experience us, how we want other people to experience us, right? And these are obvious physical elements. They can be seen in your body. So for example, waking up every day at 6 o'clock in the morning and going for a run in the park, or going for a run, for like a kilometer run, that is a habit. That is something that you actively get up and do, right? When you go to school and you get there between 8:30 and 3:30, and then you come back from school and you do your homework from 5 o'clock until 7 o'clock. And then from 7, you have dinner with family, you have conversations with family, find out how they've been doing, how was their day at work, how was their day at school for those who are at school, and having that conversation with them. That is a sort of behavior, right? Where you are now engaging with other people and you're showing that other people that, well, I want to find out how you're doing, right? Another sort of behavior that you might have is to say, maybe as a working person, that when I come back from work, as soon as I walk out at 4:30 or at 5 o'clock and I close my laptop, I will not open that laptop again until 9 the following day, right? That is another behavior that speaks to your wellness and how you enjoy your wellness and how you express your wellness, or how you contribute towards your wellness. So these behaviors and these habits that we often express often intertwine, right? Because if you go for a run and you have a nice healthy diet that has your carbohydrates, your protein, your bit of sugar, your bit of oil, you having a nice balanced diet, That is a set of habits. It's things that you're actively doing to keep yourself well. And these are obvious physical elements to our wellness, right? And so that's what wellness is these obvious physical elements that we take, these activities and actions that we take and do in order to make sure that we are in a good state of mental health, right? And then mental well-being. Mental well-being is a state of mind. It's a state of being, right? And so this is a mental element. There's an obvious mental element. Again, that sort of connection and parallel is drawn between the physical elements of our bodies and the mental elements of our bodies, right? So this speaks to our emotions, this speaks to our feelings. Are we able to express our emotions in an adequate way? Are we able to have interpersonal conflict in a way that is constructive? We able, Daniel, thank you. Are we able to interact with other people in a way that is healthy and that is meaningful? Are we able, when we have our now inside of us, our interpersonal conflicts, are we able to resolve those conflicts that we have inside of us for a state of wellness within like our own emotions and our own psychology? And like I said, these two go hand in hand in shaping our mental health, because whatever you're feeling and whatever is going on with your mind and your state of being is going to be reflected in your set of habits, in your behaviors. When you're not feeling so well emotionally, that is reflected physically on you, because we see that you're sad, you're down, those types of things. So these two go hand in hand to anchor mental health. Now, let's have a bit of a 5-minute, 2-minute discussion in terms of the experiences that we have, maybe from our own communities around us, our own families. What are the communal perceptions of mental health have you heard? How is mental health viewed in your community? When you come to a person and you're speaking about mental health, whether that's your sister or that's your brother or your sibling or your father, parent, mother, how is that viewed in your community? So are there things like stigma when it comes to mental health, or you are pretty free to express however you feel in your own family, in your own community, without being stigmatized? People can raise their hands, or they can just pop into the chat box and basically tell us in terms of how is mental health viewed in their own communities. Khuputso, you may go. Let me just.
Thank you, Chulu. So mental health in my community prior to COVID was not taken seriously. A lot of people never understood its importance, and they really weren't as educated. But now it seems as though a lot more people are aware of the importance of maintaining a good mental health. Although, yeah, I think it's also because of the high suicide rates that we've been exposed to, and just how so many people have literally maybe fallen into depression, or have various mental health issues like your ADHD, or they bipolar, and they seem not to get treatment, and the results that come with that are very, yeah, they're very terrible, because maybe at that time the person doesn't know, or their parents still have a certain stigma towards mental health education instead of them actually being educated about it. So I think certain TV shows and discussions and various social media posts and awareness of mental health have actually changed the narrative of how important mental health is and how it should be prioritized. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Kgopotso. I think mental health has become a topic that everyone is talking about, especially on social media. You know, I'm liking it for us as young people, where we are generally speaking about these things on social media, whereas people in the generations before us really didn't speak about it. And they didn't have platforms like social media. So even when you're not able to find community within your physical community and the people that are around you, you're able to find community on social media. And that's one of like the few things that social media has been helpful with in our living spaces as people. And people have become more exposed to talk about mental health. And that also encourages them to share about mental health. And I think that has also shown people that you are not alone. You're able to speak out and you're able to gain community from that. I mean, I know that on Facebook, there are groups that are formed, particularly just around mental health, and offering support to people that are going through the same thing that you're going through. Let's just go to the chat a bit. Dominic is joining us from Nairobi, Kenya, from Maseno University. Welcome, Dominic. Nika is saying, from a religious perspective, there's a lot of stigma. It is rather viewed as a lack of faith, which I find disappointing, as having a support system is vital, especially when you're having a bad mental health day or just feeling a little wobbly. Yes, a lot of the times it is viewed as though you're not, you don't have faith and all of that. And more than anything, when you are like reaching out to people, especially in a religious space, it is rather, making you feel some type of way when you are trying to reach out and say, yo, I need help in this, with that. You would expect that in a religious space, like church, for example, you are going to get help. You are going to get community for that. I know that like churches have normalized things like, for example, couples therapy or marriage counseling before people get married and all of that. So you would think that then churches would be spaces that prioritize mental health, and you'd find the least stigma with the church, and also using your faith to strengthen you as a person in terms of taking care of yourself, and just generally improving your mental health and offering you support and community, and really helping people when they're feeling like they're a little wobbly or they're in a slump, to get out of that slump. So there's like a lot of talk that needs to be had around that, by people who like believe in religion and all of that, in our churches, in our communities, because also generally religious institutions form part of our communities. These are some of the first social interactions that we have as children growing up to be young people. These are the first interactions that we have with community, and with some things they offer great support. So it would be really great to also see them actively tackling issues of mental health, particularly with young people, because we feel we fall prone to mental health issues and wobbly mental health at times. Shanae is saying that some people in my community don't believe that ADHD and autism in children is a mental illness, but attention-seeking behavior, which is imprinting a negative cloud on mental health. That makes me believe a lot is still in denial, even after so many years of mental health awarenesses. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't understand mental health conditions. A lot of people don't understand autism. And like the other stigma, particularly in the context of Africa, coming from an African country myself, being an African youth, You know, we know the sort of stigma that is attached to when someone has a mental condition, or they have a mental health issue or sickness that is related to mental health. You know, there's a lot of stigma, and there's like a lot of talk around witchcraft, and really, again, like bringing it back to religious institutions. There have been historically, you know, in African communities, support systems. For example, I had a talk with a friend around postnatal depression, and we're talking about how in our culture, pre-colonial times, this is something that still happens even to this day. After you give birth, you are assigned people from your family who are supposed to help you in the first years of your child growing, so as to relieve a bit of pressure, and also understanding that a lot of changes to your body are happening, and there's also this new person that you have to take care of. So there has been systems of support to help people deal with mental health. Even when it comes to grief, for example, there are certain practices in our culture that we do when we are in mourning, and when we are in the process of grief. So mental health has been a thing for African people, but I guess the introduction of terms has also sort of, you know, shaken the perspective a bit, and people saying, well, that is just like a white thing. Black people don't have mental health issues. If you do have mental health issues, it's either you're very weak and you're not strong in your faith, or you have been bewitched, and so, you know, or you're just lazy, or you are attention seeking. All of these sort of things that people who are faced with mental health conditions, and at times those mental conditions going as far as illness, you know, because you may start like feeling a bit of anxiety, right? And then that anxiety becomes chronic, and now it becomes a disorder. And then from that, you experience full-blown depression, where you are now totally out of commission and you're sick, right? And so we need to then reflect in terms of how do we as communities view mental health, and how do we then cultivate a good mental space for the people around us. And Paul is just giving a greeting from Zambia. Okay, now let's move a bit forward. How does climate change and mental health intersect? Right. So like I said in the beginning, as we're starting this conversation, that our wellness and well-being is connected to the environment, and its forms of wellness generally as the environment, right? We have this belief at African Climate Alliance that as people, we are of the environment. That is a scientific fact. As human beings, we form part of the environment, right? So when there is a disconnect in the environment, there's going to be a disconnect in our health. So it is important then that we zoom in and interrogate, how does the disconnect that is there in the environment affect us as people? In what ways? And how can we deal with that? Understanding that our bodies and our wellness and our well-being is connected to the environment and its forms of wellness, because the environment also needs wellness. The environment also needs to be healthy. You know, it's like when you have a plant, you can see when your plant is sick. You can see when your plant is healthy, it's doing well, because you're watering it enough, it's getting enough sunlight, it's getting enough breathing air, and all of that, right? So the forms of wellness for the environment are directly connected to our forms of wellness as people. And our bodies generally are very sensitive to changes in our environment. I'm one of those people. I have like sinusitis, which is the inflammation of the sinuses. So like whenever we're going from winter into spring and into summer, my sinuses will start getting inflamed, and I'm going to experience hay fever, and I'm going to need a bit of antihistamines and all of that. And that is with just general normal weather changes, seasonal changes, from it being winter into spring, flowers are blooming. So you see it in your body that, well, the environment is changing from summer to winter, from winter to spring, that type of thing. But then if our bodies are sensitive to those kinds of changes, they are obviously sensitive to extreme kinds of changes like climate change. So if your body is just generally sensitive to changes like from winter into spring, your body is obviously going to be sensitive to it going from being a severe drought or like being a very dry year, and all of a sudden there's a lot of rainfall that is leading to floods and landslides and mudslides and all of that, right? So our bodies are very sensitive to the changes that are happening to the environment. And so when those changes happen in extremes, our bodies also face extreme changes in the physical and also in the mental, right? You may be feeling a bit wobbly or a bit down, and you're just like, well, I don't understand why. And when you look outside and you look at the weather patterns, for example, or you look just generally, how has it been for the past week in terms of weather? And you realize, oh, it's been a bit gloomy. And that's why I'm feeling also a bit gloomy. That's why we also have like sayings like, I'm feeling a bit under the weather, you know? So when the weather is not giving, your body is also not giving, right? So when these changes are bad and possibly life-threatening, they can cause stress and anxiety because we fear generally climate emergencies that displace us as people, right? We have fear that there is going to be a food shortage. If there is a drought, for example, we fear that we are going to go in a famine. We won't be able to have water to drink. We won't be able to plow and farm food. Animals are going to die, so we won't have some of the protein that we get from meat, for example. We won't be able to get some of the nutrients that we get from plants because it's like now all dry and we can't do anything, right? So there is a genuine fear of climate emergencies, not only with them threatening our food and water sources, but them also threatening our lives. Because if there's a tsunami, your life is threatened. If there is a hurricane, your life is threatened, right? If there is a drought, your life is threatened. You could get a severe case of dehydration and get very sick. So these are just generally life-threatening climate emergencies, and the fear of displacement, losing your home, losing the one place that you go and retire at the end of a very bad day or at the end of a very nice happy day, just generally losing your home and being displaced. And as African people, we have ties to the places that we are located in and places that we stay in. You know, we have ancestral ties to those kinds of places, and now being displaced and move from this place to that place because you have been affected by a climate emergency is also quite, you know, stress inducing and anxiety inducing. And also with climate emergencies comes a lot of trauma, and so a lot of people will experience, because this has happened recurringly, or even when it has happened once, it happened maybe in 2015 that you experience a climate emergency, but it is now 2023, and every time you hear a bit of thunder and see a bit of lightning, you scream and go helter-skelter, you know, because you're experiencing PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because you were once traumatized by this and we are not able to deal with that trauma at that point in time, because a lot is happening when there's a climate emergency. So you're not able at times to deal with some of the trauma that you incur from that. Now, years later, when something happens that is not as threatening as what you had experienced happens, you go helter-skelter. And it is because generally you had that trauma that is unresolved and are now sitting with post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of anxiety comes with these climate emergencies too, because like I said, you have to worry about what you're going to eat, you have to worry about where you're going to stay, where you're going to be sleeping, you have to be worrying about school, you have to be worrying about your job, because you still need to get money to feed your family and all of these things. So it induces a lot of anxiety, you know, and excessive stress, and a lot of other conditions that we could list out here, like depression, you know. And there are people who also have already conditions that are pre-existing. So if you're a person that, for example, had generalized anxiety disorder, you are now more prone to be triggered by all of that is happening with the climate, and just generally the fear of ever pending doom, and knowing that we are killing our planet, and that is going to give us very dire consequences. We're going to get very dire results from that. And so because there is this thought of ever impending doom, you're just generally so stressed and so anxious, you know. And so imagine now that you already have like a pre-existing condition, and this adds onto all that. So those are like sort of the ways that climate change intersects with our mental health and how it affects our mental health. Because the changes that are happening are causing changes to our body, and the changes that are happening are making us feel certain types of feelings, and those feelings are making us stressed. They are causing trauma, those emergencies that are happening. We're experiencing anxieties, we're experiencing depression because of everything that is happening. And that is how climate change and mental health intersect. So there is this concept or term called eco-anxiety. A lot of people, when we speak about climate change and mental health, and how our mental health intersects with climate change, or how climate change intersects with our mental health, a lot of people speak about eco-anxiety, that they're feeling eco-anxiety. A lot of experts too speak of people experiencing eco-anxiety. But what is eco-anxiety? So in the previous slide, I spoke about the fact that we are constantly thinking of this ever pending doom, because we can see that our planet is being killed, right? So eco-anxiety is this chronic fear of suffering environmental doom, because we know that our planet is being killed. People are living like they have planet number 2, they have Earth 2.0. We know that there is now a pending environmental doom, and we constantly thinking about that. And so eco-anxiety now is the chronic fear. So it's extreme fear of suffering environmental doom. And this fear can stem from a couple of things. It can stem from having experienced climate emergencies as a person. So imagine, I think that was in August that we did a case study on Cyclone Freddy. Now imagine being a person who experienced Cyclone Freddy, right? It obviously is not a pleasant experience. It is obviously a very traumatic experience, where people are displaced, where people are hurt, where people now don't have food, or like very limited food, very limited water, very limited medical resources, and all of that. All right. So it is not a pleasant experience. It is a very traumatic experience. So having that direct experience with Cyclone Freddy, for example, will then cause this fear of experiencing or suffering environmental doom. So, apologies. So that means that you as a person will constantly have this anxiety around, could another cyclone happen? Is another cyclone happening? When is another cyclone going to happen? Is it happening right now? Oh, it's going on. Now you're going helter-skelter in your own brain, having this conflict in your own brain. And it induces this chronic fear, because you had this experience that was very traumatic. that people just expect you to move on from it, because we all experienced it. We all lost our houses. We all needed food. We all were doing this. We all were doing that. We must just be able to move on from it. But this instills a very real chronic fear in people of suffering environmental doom, because they have directly experienced climate emergencies, or they have seen people close to them experience those climate emergencies. You can imagine, for example, when the floods in the Eastern Cape and in KZN happened in South Africa, right? And a lot of people had family members who were affected, even though they were not affected, right? And that is very traumatizing. The mere thought of losing your family members in connection to that, and then having to be there with them emotionally and at times physically when you are able to help them pick up the pieces and rebuild their life, and still know that this is probable to happen again, because the climate is changing and we're experiencing these extreme changes in our environment because of that. So having those direct experiences, and even at times indirect experiences, because our family members and our friends and our loved ones have gone through that kind of experience, right? And we also spoke of social media and the sort of exposure that we have to social media and the news. We live in a world where we have a 24-hour news cycle. At every hour of every day, there is news. Social media also adds to that. There is constant cycling of news. So we exposed to climate change information and news through media and social media at all times. And this causes us anxiety. I was telling, was it Gabriel or Michelle last week? And I was like, yo, the news are depressing. Like, I have to watch the news once a week. I want to know what's going on in the world. But everything that is happening is depressing. You look here, it's climate change, this. You look there, corruption. You look there, whoa. You look, everything is depressing, right? So you have this constant exposure to information and news through media and social media that is very depressing, that is very stressful. It's horrible news, people dying everywhere. So that definitely makes you feel a sense of an impending doom, just generally, and having close calls with climate emergencies. So imagine, for example, you were just in Malawi, like, and then you took a flight and went into Kenya, for example. And when you land at Nairobi International Airport, you get a news update, breaking news, Cyclone Freddy just hit. You literally just missed you by mere hours. So having such close calls, or like being in the thick of that climate emergency, but somehow you are spared. Other people's houses were washed away in the cyclone or in the flood, and somehow your house is spared, and you had such a close call. And that's the thing, having a close call does not negate from you having the very same trauma of someone who went through that, because also you went through that yourself and you were thinking, it is happening, and it just so by roll of a dice missed you, but you still have that trauma. Only because now it didn't happen, I can let go. No, you still have that trauma. So close calls with climate emergencies. I remember when I was in high school and there was a big fire in Cape Town, and we saw a school that was like, I think 10 kilometers ahead of our school evacuated. I was staying in boarding school, and they evacuated to our school. So we're like, oh, we're fine. I mean, that means the fire is still far because we're not evacuating. And that was like around 7 p.m., 6 p.m. in the evening. Next thing we know, at 2 in the morning, a fire drill goes on, and they're like, yo, the fire is here. We need to evacuate everyone. And it's 2 in the morning. And we have people from different backgrounds. We have people whose parents don't even have cars, and they're being told to leave school 2 in the morning. And these are children. We're like 15 years old, 14 years old. So you can imagine having that close call with a climate emergency as a child, and you don't even know what to do at that point. You don't know where to start. You don't even know where to begin. You still also worried. So the math test we're supposed to have in the morning, is it still going to happen? This and that and that and that and that, right? And there's this big thing happening. Though the fire never burned our school, never got to our school, but the fact that it was that close traumatized us enough. And that was valid enough that we were traumatized, right? And so same goes for false alarms, right? For example, Johannesburg in South Africa has been getting a lot of earth tremors, right? And a lot of the times it's attributed to the fact that it's a mining community. There's a lot of mining communities surrounding Johannesburg, so it's just earth tremors probably from that and all of that. But this happens after Turkey had experienced an earthquake, and I think Johannesburg had about 3 or 4 earth tremors, and then at another point there was a pipe blow up. So everyone is just like, whoa, was that an earthquake? So like, even when it's a false alarm, you already prepared for the fact that it is happening. Your brain goes into fight or flight mode because it's thinking it is happening right now. And that causes trauma. So all of these things put together, the chronic fear of suffering environmental doom can stem from these things. That's causing eco-anxiety or eco-climate change, as some say it. So who is at risk as we go towards trying to wrap this up, and then we can have a bit of a discussion before we can close today? Young people, so you and me, are at most risk because we are the generation that will bear the most brunt of climate change, right? We young people, we still have to grow up and have futures and all of that. So we become very fearful of the future because, one, at this point, we don't even know whether that future is actually going to get here at the level and at the point things are going at. We don't even know. So we're very worried and very fearful of the future and how it's going to look, considering right now that we are banning in Africa like fish in a frying pan. And we know we are a hot continent, but not this hot, you know? And at the same time, we're we know rainfall is a thing, but this is a bit too excessive. So at this point, we're seeing that climate emergencies are happening one after the other consecutively all the time, everywhere. And so we're very fearful of how the future is going to look like. So as young people, we very much are at risk of eco-anxiety and just generally mental conditions and illnesses and just general ailment and feeling wobbly, because we're also the ones who are exposed to social media most, because it is our generation that is mostly on social media, and constantly seeing this news cycle and constantly being spammed by a lot of information. I mean, just scrolling through TikTok, for example, you have a load of information summarized in very small, short videos that is coming at you. So imagine if your algorithm is climate change, and let's say you're a person like me who follows current affairs. Now, everything that comes at you is everything that's going wrong with the world. It's everything that's going wrong with our environment. It's everything that people are doing to kill our planet, So we are the ones who are at most risk because of that. And indigenous people, that term makes me cringe, but we use it until we find alternative and better terms and co-create and co-define together. Indigenous people also get affected most because nature plays a very important role in both culture and just generally everyday life, right? And I say this as an African, like I said, that the places that we stay at, our land, the environment and everything, there are cultural and ancestral ties to that. And so if then you are faced with displacement, for example, you have to be moved to elsewhere, that affects you greatly because you are leaving behind, for example, grave sites where close family members are buried, and that's your ancestry. You're leaving it there, and just generally your house, your livelihood. Africa is also quite a very agrarian continent. We do a lot of agricultural farming, fishing, hunting, those kinds of things. We can't now engage in those kinds of things. And just generally our everyday lives, the things that we wake up and do every day and go on about their lives, about our lives, are affected. So we're at risk because of that. And obviously marginalized groups, like I said, displaced person. So if you've already been, imagine your shack was washed away and you were already displaced to another place. Now you're being moved back and forth like a ping pong ball. And obviously people who have lower socioeconomic resources, this means generally that those that have the fewest resources for adaptation, because we need to adapt whilst we are trying to make the changes that we're trying to make and trying to reverse the damage that's been done. We need to adapt to how things are happening. So if there is a flood, a person who has the most resources is able to bounce back. They're able to claim property insurance, and in the next month their house is standing again. But as a person who can't afford that, you're not able to have that. So marginalized groups in the different forms, so in the sense of displaced persons, lower socioeconomic resources, have little chances of being able to adapt. And obviously work closely with the environment, like I said, farmers, fishers, hunters, and everything. And people living in high-risk areas. That's just generally areas who are set geographically to be high-risk areas. So other regions face a greater risk of, extreme effects of climate change than others. E.g., people who live close to coastlines. I mean, Cape Town is very close to the coastline. People who live in islands, so like very coastal areas, and all of that. So because of the positioning of certain groups, or like not groups, certain regions, you face a greater risk of greater effects of climate change because of that. Right. So just a quick one on adaptation. How do we cope? We're already in this situation. We are trying to reverse the damage, but we're also trying to keep ourselves healthy mentally and physically. So how do we cope? And how do we make sure that we're not only just surviving and coping, we're able to go beyond that and be happy and interact with our environment and live in the environment and live with the environment, right? So one of the things, especially when it comes to social media and this 24-hour news cycle, get the facts and avoid doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is basically that thing that people do. They're like, I have a pimple. Then you go to Mayo Clinic. What does it mean when I have a pimple on my forehead? Mayo Clinic next thing is saying you have cancer of the what. You move next, you're like, yo, I'm dying tomorrow, Mos. That's doom scrolling, basically. So once you get that on TikTok, you're like, let me see this. Then next thing, you up at 3 a.m, crying yourself to sleep because you're scrolling through TikTok and seeing that everyone is just going up in flames. So get the facts, especially on social media, and avoid doom scrolling. 2, acknowledge your emotions. Like I said, whatever we're feeling here and here, so whatever we're feeling in our minds and whatever we're feeling in our emotions, in our hearts, it is important that we acknowledge that and deal with that. You're feeling a bit under the weather, you acknowledge that. Today I'm not feeling so well, so I'm not going to push myself beyond this point. People always say, show up, you must show up, especially as young people like that. Like, you must show up. But you must understand that showing up today could look like a 40%. Showing up tomorrow could look like 100. The following day, showing up could look like a 25%. Acknowledge that. Try and be aware of the things that you're feeling. Talk to people around you and tell them that, yo, even like I'm one of those people, like I'm my parents' baby. You go to your mom and you're like, yo, not feeling well, man. Like everything is just because of what's happening. You go to your friends. We have friends. You go to your friends and you cultivate these healthy relationships by also acknowledging your emotions, acknowledging the emotions of those that are around you. When you don't have capacity to deal with that, you let people know that I don't have capacity today. When they don't feel like they have capacity, they let you know that I don't have capacity today. And respecting those sorts of boundaries and respecting our emotions. And most importantly, focus on the things that you can control and the things that you can change. And I'm saying this because it is something that I'm also very guilty about. Because now, after you've doom scrolled and you've seen that, yeah, everything is bad, now you're going berserk in your mind. And you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe. Focus on what you're able to do and focus on what you're able to control. And most of these things start very little, like very small things that you can do to make yourself feel better, things that you can do to make yourself feel a bit more energized, things that you can do to express your emotions, things that you can do to make yourself feel warm and fuzzy and feel held by your community. And that leads me to the last point: connect with others and seek additional help where needed. It's very important that we talk. We will talk until the end of time. It is very important that you talk. Talk with others. You get an understanding of the fact that I am not going through this alone. There's other people who are going through this stuff. That alone will make you feel better. But that also means through talking, you're also able to gain some tips, gain some advice, and ultimately at times even get ideas of what you could do to make yourself feel better. And things like, for example, we have a whole organization, an alliance, African Climate Alliance. These things start by talking. It's one person saying, actually, I am feeling like this today. And the next saying, I also feel like this. And I wish there was something I could do. There is something we can do. What if we do this? And then, we start making ourselves feel better. We start feeling better emotionally. We start feeling better physically. And we start doing whatever we're able to do and focusing on what we're able to control and what we're able to do at that moment in time. Right. And just now, towards the last 5 minutes of this before we go into the discussion, communal health equals individual health. When you are healthy communally, you as the individual person that's coming from that community, you are also going to be healthy. So the focus here is on how can we help each other as people. So you encourage loved ones to voice their concerns and fears. So if people are feeling a bit fearful around what is happening, they're feeling a bit down, around the dinner table, talk with your family. At school during break, when you're having lunch, you talk with your friends. Oh, how are you doing actually? And actually find out how people are doing. And at times when you're talking to younger siblings, for example, be prepared to answer questions about the climate and climate change. And also don't be scared to say, well, I don't know. We can do more research together if you want. So if your younger sibling that is like a 5-year-old or 6-year-old is like, what is even climate change? I just see it's very hot. Or we're supposed to go for a park excursion thing in class. Now we can't go because it's been raining for a whole month. So, we need to explain climate change is this and that and that and that. And this is what you can do. This is why you're feeling like this and all of that. And you are able to also develop an action plan with your friends and family to do things that will make you feel well and take care of each other. So remember I said just talking really helps. So talking with your family members will now have you feeling like, what can we do to make ourselves feel better, as a family? And then next thing, well, let's go for a picnic at the park, or let's go to the community pool, the local pool, those kinds of things, just to make you bond and take care of each other as your family, and just prioritize each other's wealth. And always share hope and get involved. And I'm really proud that this point, we actually actively doing it right now. The 30-some people that are in this call are getting involved, and we're trying to share hope amongst each other and saying, how do we adapt to the constant changes that are happening? And direct others to mental resources in your communities or in your country or in your province, so that when they need them, they have access to that. And build a general spirit of community. And this is something that has been done so beautifully on social media. And this is something that as a people we have done countless times. We can build that spirit of community. And spirit of community is not something we build today and we're like, oh, we're done, we've built it. No, spirit of community is something that is constant. It's like change, it's constant, it's happening all the time. You're constantly building spirit of community. And lastly, use nature as a wellness clinic and as an environmental clinic. Just general exposure to nature has many health benefits, just physically and non-physically. Just knowing that I'm able to take a walk when I'm not feeling well. It's one of the things that I enjoy. When I'm just not feeling well, I'll just go take a walk. Just mosey around. You start seeing things that you didn't even realize. You're like, oh, didn't know there was like a bit of a bushy thing here with flowers. Next thing you've even forgotten that you were stressing. So it generates positive emotions. And like I said, once you start feeling better mentally and emotionally, that is also reflected on your body. So always try to develop and generate those positive emotions and hold on to them. And also can improve your attention span or your concentration span, and will better your mood. Just as an experiment this week, if you're feeling some type of way, just go to your nearest park or your nearest place that is just quiet and green. There's not much traffic around and all of that. Of course, as safe as possible. Don't go now to a mountain and it's not safe. So try and do it in as safe as possible a space, and just sit there. If you have a journal. If you have a book that you want to read, it could be a set work book from school, could be, when I was still at high school, we used to have set work books with short stories or novels that you're reading in class, and just sit there, even if it's for 30 to 45 minutes. Sit there and read, and I promise you, you will feel so much better. That will be some of the best reading you have done ever. So it's important. And now, as we bring it to a close, it's time for our discussion. So any questions, any comments, any answers that anyone has? Michelle, before we open it up for comments and questions, do you have anything that you would like to add? Michelle? Okay, so you can raise your hand. Let me stop sharing my screen for a moment. You can raise your hand and you will be noted and you can talk. You can unmute and talk, or you can go to the chat box and just pop your thoughts and your comments there. I think this was a very packed, workshop. This is one of the, workshops that we've done that were so packed in terms of adaptation, just generally, in terms of what we can do to make ourselves feel better, especially because we're at a time where everything is happening all at the same time. We're constantly surrounded by bad news of what is happening in the world. There's climate change, there's war, there's corruption, there's this, there's that, and there's no one really interested in, like, you know, giving us the solutions. So it's important that we come here and we have, you know, these kinds of conversations and also build that community, because this in itself is a community that we're trying to build. Judith is saying, thanks for sharing the teachings. Brian is saying, thank you for such a good explanation on the topic. I feel more informed, much appreciated. Judith is saying, well understood, well explained. Thank you by Simon. Gift is saying, nice one. I'm really glad that this is a conversation that everyone is getting into, even if it's a conversation that had not been started for you. In like your area where you are in your spaces, but I'm really glad that this is a conversation that now has been sparked, and it's a conversation that you can, you know, go out there and share with people around you in trying to take care of ourselves and taking care of those around us and constantly building that spirit of community. Lorraine is saying, thank you for a great session. It's eye-opening. Tyra is saying, nice discussion and insights. I didn't know climate change can affect my mental health. Thank you for a nice clarification. Thank you for that, Tyra. You know, it's very important that we discuss, like this in particular, this conversation, because October is also mental awareness month, mental health awareness month, because on the 10th of October, the world was commemorating Mental Health Awareness Day. You know, so it's also important that these conversations happen, not only at times like these, that there is like a designated day for it, that it's Mental Health Awareness Day today on the 10th of October. But these are conversations that are supposed to be there constantly, you know, because our mental health is constantly there with us. So it's important that we are constantly trying to understand, how can we make ourselves feel better? How can we make those around us, you know, feel better? Khuputso is saying, thank you so much for everything. This was a fruitful and insightful session. Thank you so much, Khuputso, for that. And thank you, everyone. And Brian is saying, so sorry. It's Wilkester, sorry, saying an awesome session to learn a lot, especially about mental health, a topic that I do associate with being kind and caring for each other. Very much appreciated. I'm just going to ask Michelle to please drop in the data reimbursement form on the chat. Is Michelle still with us? Yeah, Michelle, can you please kindly drop the data reimbursement form link on the chat so that everyone is able to claim for their data at the end of this. But like, yeah, thank you so much for everyone. This has been such a fruitful, you know, conversation. This is, you know, a conversation that is really important, that inspires us to be kind, you know, every day. And it's important that we are, you know, kind to each other, because we don't know like the kinds of experiences that people are having outside, you know, of these spaces that we're in. So it's important then that we experience kindness from each other and we express kindness to those around us. That's very important. So thank you for everyone for your contributions. I am just going to drop the data reimbursement form on the, just give me a moment. Just going to drop the data reimbursement form on here in the chat. Everyone, there we go. I have forwarded I forwarded the data reinvestment form in the chat, and I hope everyone is able to access it. Just flag it for me right now if you're not able to access it, but you should be able to access it. If you're having a bit of struggle with that, you can try and log in with your email so that you're able to access it. And if you're having any other issues, you can email us at education at African Alliance at africanclimatealliance.org. That's education at africanclimatealliance.org. If you have any questions, we do on Wednesday have another session that will be our monthly ACA dialogue, where we'll be joined by a panel of experts and activists who work in the social and climate justice space and who do work around mental health, and we will be having a bit more conversation with them in terms of mental health and the kind of work that they do and how that connects to what we spoke about today, which is mental health, and how that connects with climate change and how climate change actually affects our mental health. Ellen is saying this is the information we need each and every day to overcome the current situation on mental health. Yes, a lot is happening, like Khupoto said at the beginning of this conversation, the first discussion we had, that we have been exposed to a lot of people struggling with mental health and their cries for help not being, really heeded. So it's important that we have this kind of information. And we're hopeful that with our monthly workshops, we, are able to cultivate a space that is safe for everyone to be able to, contribute. And I have forwarded the data reinvestment form. I will just paste it again and send it so that everyone has it. There you go. And Michelle has also provided us with the email. Again, it's education at africanclimatealliance.org. And let's have a bit of a checkout before we end today's discussion. Let me just go to that. So you can just give us your name in the chat, where you are checking out from, and one thing you are basically taking away from this session, and going back now to, what we were feeling like, those little monkeys, how we're arriving earlier, the little animal slides that we have there. So where you're checking in, when you're checking out from, and how are you feeling after the session? On that slide, we have 1 to 10. So Judith and Dominic, I'm just going to send the link again so that you see which one is which. The one that is coming from me to everyone, that is the link. The one that I just sent just this second. So people in the chat, you can quickly just check out for us as we have hit the top of the hour. And then as we, are trying to, Lorraine is checking out from Kenya. I can give my check out so long whilst I wait for people to. I'm checking out from South Africa, and I am feeling like the puppy on 7 right now because that was quite a nice session. Nyasha Marambi checking out from Zambia, Thomas Banda checking out from Zambia, and their takeaway from the lesson is climate change and mental health go together. And Nika checking out from Johannesburg and feeling like number 6, which is the monkey. Love and warmth, Nika, there. Okay, We will close it there with the checkouts for today. Thank you so much for joining us once again. We will be having the ACA dialogue on Wednesday, which will also be happening at the same time. So from 5:30 until 7 in the evening, Central African time. And we will be joined by a panel of experts and activists who do a lot of work around mental health and the social and climate justice space. Thank you so much, everyone.